if we do all of these things, if we're relentless and we're competitive and we're great teammates, we're accountable, we're appreciative, we feel like we're bringing enthusiasm. Like it's sort of over, it's like, it's always going to be there. We're going to bring that. And we feel like these things bring it. But the one thing that's not on there is that resilience, that relentless, a lot of it stemmed from our pressure. They believed in it. We had pressure on the back of our shirts, on our programs. Other coaches would comment in the paper. I used to love it. They would write, "Oh, the pressure got to us," and I would copy it and show the kids.
Welcome to the JAMODI Podcast. We are all surrounded by amazing coaches and leaders. So let's get an inside look at not just what they do, but how they do what they do. After all, becoming the best versions of ourselves is JAMODI, just a matter of doing it.
Today we're joined by the founder of Get Better Basketball, Jon Demarco. Coach Demarco spent 20 plus years coaching basketball and football, 5 years as a head coach at Hamilton Wenham. He was named Massachusetts Coach of the Year by the Boston Globe, 2-time Salem News Coach of the Year, and 2-time Cap and League Coach of the Year. Hamilton Wenham hadn't made the state tournament in 15 years before Coach Demarco became the head coach. They made in his first season and years after. Coach Demarco started the Get Better Basketball and Get Better Everyday brand in 2019. He's hosted the Get Better Basketball Chat on X every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. for 332 straight weeks. To learn more, check out CoachDemarco.com. Before we hear from Coach, take a moment to subscribe to our podcast and follow us on social media at JAMODI Podcast.
Welcome to the Ballology app Ultimate Demo. Trusted by leaders in the game. Ballology is a player development platform built for coaches and players alike. You can expect live shot tracking, workout libraries, and AI insights. You can easily chart team shooting drills in practice or in training sessions. Track all of those shots using an iPhone or an Android device in real time. You can view your team's performance through a video archive or by using our shot charts. After every shooting workout, take a look at your breakdown by viewing your percentages and your shot locations. Let's take a deeper look to learn how to make the most out of the Ballology app. Let's see how you measure up in the Ballology Skills Assessment, where you can test your shooting skills versus other shooters worldwide. Navigate to Ballology AI, where you can ask any question to get answers in real time for smarter training.
Make that footwork a little more sharp.
Coaches or players can create custom workouts in just minutes. Hit your on-court skills or basketball IQ or even strength and conditioning. It can be done on the Ballology app. Compete with everything you do on the Ballology app through our workout leaderboards. Elevate your game with the Ballology app. Download it for free today.
Coach, how we doing?
I'm doing well. How you doing, Coach?
Awesome, man. Thanks for coming on here talking hoops with me. This is great.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to any chance I get to talk hoops, coaching, I love it. So
Yeah, I've enjoyed so much getting to follow you on Twitter. That's really where this all came from. And then thankfully, I saw a post that you put out about a 2-1-2 3-quarter press. And I say thankfully because we run this pressure 3-2 that I've extended our guards to half court, but I've always thought there has to be a really good 3-quarter court version of this with more pressure and trapping in it. And I found yours. So excited to try that out this year. I'll give you all the credit when it works well.
no, I appreciate that. That's something I actually learned way back in high school. My high school team ran it, and I think Patino used to call it his blue and white presses. My coach got it from that way back in the day, and I've always kind of kept it with me, and I've picked up a few things from other coaches and how they do it, and then obviously some teams that I've seen use it. So it's a great press, actually, and you don't see it a lot, which makes it tougher to play against.
Yeah. After 20 years of coaching, how did Get Better Basketball start, and you wanting to share the game on Twitter, but then also on YouTube? Your YouTube page is great as well.
Yeah, so I had coached for a lot of years, and when my son was born, who's now 7, and I took an assistant principal job, I knew I had to cut back somewhere, and now I have 3 kids that are 4, 5, and 7. So I started to think, how could I stay in the game? So I started doing some training. I always sort of use get better as a mantra, try to get a little better each day. I know a lot of coaches talk about that. And I started a Get Better Basketball chat on Twitter at that time, now X, I think in 2019. We're up to about 298 weeks straight now that I've done that. And I appreciate all the coaches that chime in each week and share on the Get Better Basketball chat. During COVID, I said, you know what, I'm going to use my time wisely. And I started a YouTube channel, Get Better Basketball. And I just recently started Coach Demarco, the website. And I got a patent for the Get Better Everyday phrase, which was pretty cool. So
Nice.
it kind of just piece by piece, but really the love for coaching, I think we probably both share. And how can I stay in this and continue to do this, something I love, but it would be hard to make that commitment as a school administrator. We work long hours and we're at games and events and things, and obviously having little kids at home. So I guess I found a way around it.
Coach, you had me at school administrator as far as being busy. That's just something I've never wanted to touch. And I had my principal a couple of years ago. We had some AD changes here, and he was like, Matt, you interested in that? And I just looked at it and said, absolutely not, sir, not at all. But so you had me with that, and then you add the 3 kids on. Oh my goodness, that's a lot. So yeah, I definitely can see you making the change. 98 weeks straight, that kind of consistency, that's incredible. What does it take for you to not miss a week? And I'm asking a little bit for myself, doing this, I want to try to stay consistent with this, but I'm nowhere near that. So.
Yeah, it's funny because I love doing it. And I'm like, you know what? It's an hour every Wednesday. You can do this. And week after week, I did it, when I pretty much shut down on vacations, but I've done the chat. My wife will laugh, but we've been away different places, and I can set up the questions ahead of time, but I still get in the mix and and post things. So I've done it in different venues. I've done it. Recently just had surgery on my nose to fix my septum, and I did it in kind of bedridden. So I've done it in different forms.
That's hardcore.
Yeah, and I love it, and I'm like, this is what kind of got this all started, and let's stick with it. So just that commitment. It does help. I'm not doing the team coaching thing. I do the training. I can make my own schedule. I'm fortunate. My wife is, on board and really super supportive with everything I've done, from coaching to the school stuff and right through the chat. She'll remind me sometimes, it's 8:00. It's Wednesday. Your chat's coming on. Oh my goodness. So, I've done it in a lot of different ways. For the most part, I'm home and I'm doing it, but I've done it in different ways, and just keep it going. So I think we're up to 298 this week, and hopefully I can just keep doing it.
Will you explain the chat a little bit to me? You do it on X, you said?
Yeah, so it's on X, and the hashtag is GBETBBCHAT. So GBET chat. And I basically ask 5 questions to coaches. I do one about every 10 minutes between 8 and 9. I do some sponsorships and things to get started. But like recently we did a chat on how to attack a 1-3-1 zone. I've learned so much from coaches, and it's amazing. Youth coaches, the high school, and even, college coaches that will chime in. And even actually right up to the professional level. Mike Procopio worked with the Dallas Mavericks, who I've known for a long time, and he's chimed in a few times too. So
Nice.
Just having different, people from all different levels, and you learn so much. And there's things, me as a high school coach, I learned from college coaches, but youth coaches as well, because, they really have to break things down at that level. And they share some things from a fundamental perspective that, you don't think about sometimes. And I've learned a lot from them as well. So 5 questions. Sometimes I do a few more, but every Wednesday night at 8:00 Eastern on X. And like I said, we've had a lot of different coaches chime in, and the chat really is what it is because of those coaches. They're the ones who make it go. And I'm so thankful and grateful to have them. And some coaches do every week. They're there. And I appreciate that. It's awesome.
I love getting to ask coaches what are some of the characteristics of great leaders or coaches. And I think it's really interesting to get to ask you this because of what you do. 298 weeks of talking to coaches, I'm pretty sure this has come up in some way before. So from you, what do you think are the characteristics of great leaders or coaches?
It's a great question. And I there's always things you could talk about, expert in their sport, the motivator, the organizational piece. There's things that, I think you have to get off the ground and be a coach. But there's three things that I think of that separate coaches. And first one is really being a great communicator. I feel like that comes in different forms. There's the off the court piece, where you're working with, at the high school level, parents and teachers, and, also talking to your players and communicating with them. At the college level, I'm sure it's the administration and boosters. And at the youth level, you could talk about that communication as well. But then I think also like player feedback and effective feedback, and how does that two-way communication happen, with players? What does that look like for you? Are you setting up times? Are you intentional about that? How are you saying things to players? Because sometimes it's not what you say to them, but sort of how you say it and how they interpret it and what their perception is, and then I think, the other piece is really like you get into the sort of the X's and O's and the on-court piece. And there's great players out there who could, play at all levels and be great. But sometimes they're not always the best coaches. Sometimes they are. And I think you have to be able to articulate, the message and what your system is and what you're trying to do to players, depending on the level, whether it's youth, high school, college, professional. There's a way to do that. And I think the best coaches are able to communicate in a lot of different ways and do that effectively. I think the other thing, two things that come to mind, they sort of go together, is that growth mindset. You have to continue to grow. And I'll kind of get to that as I think about the next point. But, you also have to preach that to your players and live it and show them that you have that mindset and instill that in them. You really have to continue to grow as a coach. I talked about my Get Better Basketball chat, and I've grown a lot as a coach, as others have through that. You grow by listening to podcasts like this, where you have coaches on and, you just talk hoops, so you talk coaching, and I think sort of what coincides with that is really being one step ahead. I think the best coaches, they're one step ahead in their game plan and what they're doing in all sports. They're playing chess, not checkers. They're thinking moves ahead. They have that mindset. They're one step ahead of the curve and what's happening. They're staying up with the time. You look at basketball and the three-point shot and how much that matters and means to the game. You look at football and run-pass option, and even coaches like Nick Saban, who's retired now, so much respect from him. And I know it's not basketball, but you think about how he had to evolve from a power running play action guy that hated the spread no huddle to now he's running that and winning a national championship. So, you have to evolve and you have to continue to grow. So I think like being one step ahead is part of that growth mindset. And those are things for me that separate coaches. But of course, there's a lot of things that go into being a great coach.
I love that. And I think you nailed it, especially with that first one, being a great communicator. I think there are so many coaches that work hard at learning material or drawing on their past experience, but if we can't present it in a way that our players can hear it, see it, do it, in those areas, because everybody learns differently, then there may be some disconnect. I was talking with a coach the other day about what are some of the things that can get you fired. I think it's rarely the X's and O's. Because some parents are going to watch the game, and depending on what little Timmy, their son, is doing in that game, or maybe they have some background, they could disagree, and that's okay. I watch the Cowboys, and I don't know anything about football, and I'm disagreeing with what's happening. So that's possible. But what'll get you in trouble, one of the big ways, is a lack of communication or miscommunication, organization. I think those are the things that you can screw up on the floor a little bit, but if your communication's on point, you're probably going to be okay. But you're screwing up on the floor a little bit and you're struggling in that area, that's when emails begin.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's if you're going to run a successful program, you have to be a great communicator. And I think for all those reasons you mentioned and, things I had talked about as well. And I think sometimes it's easy to get away from all the aspects of communication, right? You think of high school coaches, you want to be in contact with the parents, you want to talk to the club, you have to meet with your coaches, but that encompasses a lot. And I think you have to really be intentional and have a really specific plan, an action plan, really, to do that effectively. And I think that organizational piece you just mentioned comes in with that as well, which is a great point.
What are your thoughts on, you mentioned communication on and off the court with your players. I think, what are your thoughts on being on all the time? Like when we're on the floor, there is a level of not just volume, but intensity and precision to what we're saying. But in our one-on-one or 10-minute meetings like I like to run, in my opinion, there should be a little bit of a change so they get to see all the sides of us. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you have to, you're a human being, and I think you have to show that side of it. And I couldn't agree more. We would host like preseason, season meetings, postseason meetings. And I think it's so important to have conversations, to be authentic, to be honest with players. I know you hear that a lot. I think there's a way to do that effectively. And, it doesn't always have to be, like that you're on the court, so to speak, as you said. I think there's ways to sit down and talk to them and talk about their growth and the positives, but areas they still need to grow, and provide that feedback to them. And, also, I think we all need to grow, right, as coaches. So it's okay to say, this is what I'm working on. This is what we're working on as a staff. This is what we want to do better. These are our stats. Because, ultimately, it's easy to look at the players and the shooting percentages or whatever it might be, but you're part of that, and you're leading that charge. So if the team's not shooting well, that they own a piece of that, but what are you doing to make them better? So I think it's okay to open up in that way with players, and I think you'll build the best relationships when you're able to do that and, turn it off a little bit, so to speak, and sort of humanize yourself. And that's such an important thing.
Yeah, and I love the accountability that you're talking about with anything that's happening wrong in our programs. It ultimately is our fault. It's that extreme ownership that Jocko Willink talks about. And one thing I was thinking about with the communication with parents, I'm reading this book right now. It's Politics and Coaching, and it's got like the different sport balls on the front and flames behind it. I should have known. And I'm really, if the author ever for some reason hears this, I'm not trying to be disrespectful in any way. And if you know him, then I'm so sorry. Okay. But the flames on the cover tells something already about maybe the perspective here that we're talking about. I've tried to take over the years the idea that my parents are allies. They're not enemies. But I do think I would recommend this book for I'm only halfway through. Maybe it changes, but I do think it's a good book to really measure yourself on, okay, this is what he's saying to do and he did. What do I do? And, there are a few things where I thought, okay, a couple golden nuggets. Like one was, he said, you need to identify your crazy parents before they identify you. And I kind of read that. And I was like, what does that mean? And he said, basically, when you think you're going to have some troubling parents, go to your AD early on and say, I just want to let you know, these are some families I'm a little worried about. Mm-hmm. His whole idea, which I love that, his whole idea was, if the AD gets the email from them, then he already knew it was coming, and it's almost like he's prepared. And I knew these guys were trouble. Coach told me that. So that was like one good nugget. But there are a ton of issues he was having. And I remember because he has his emails that he sent, like word for word, or the text messages or the activities they were doing. And I remember thinking, golly, like, I know why everybody's upset. Like, that's why right there. I think the way that we communicate with our parents in a way that they're allies, they're co-contributors to our culture, they're a stakeholder in the players' lives. Coach, I gotta imagine that's a better way to look at it.
Yeah, and I think I even think of my role as an assistant principal, and there's parents that, have challenges and things that they struggle with. And I always think about how do you bring that person in as a partner? I know you use that word partner, and I think that's so important. I think, there are parents that you work with and they're all different, just like your players are all different. And I think you have to, how do you connect with each of those families? And that's such an important part. They're entrusting you with their kid, excuse me, for, at least 2 hours a day at practice, longer with games and everything else going on. So you want them to feel good about that. And you really want to partner with them as much as possible. There's times where it can be more challenging than others. All coaches know that. But I just think for me, it was always, what can I do to sort of bridge this gap and work with this person and bring them onto the team and make them part of our team. And I think that's so important in coaching and schools and really anything that you're doing. You're going to have people with all different types of personalities and opinions and perspectives. And what are the things you're doing to sort of partner with them? And I found in my experience that they've been willing to partner back with me as well.
I think the great awareness for us to be approachable. And because when we are approachable, then we get to learn more about our parents, which in turn helps us to learn how to communicate with our players better and gives us a little bit of that insight. But I've also noticed that by having maybe an open door policy, maybe even more than when I was younger, I was comfortable with. Most parents just want to be heard. They just want you to sit there and listen to what they're saying and not have an instant reaction or an answer. You know why that's happening? Is it like, no, just I sit and I listen and I usually say, you know what, that's a good point. And I'm not trying to be fake about it. I'm actually trying to listen. I think right there, it diffuses the situation if you just sit and listen. But if you're on edge and you're combative and you're trying to fight their energy or meet it, then things just get to a bad place.
I mean, look, they're there because they love their kid and they want the best for them. And I think, you always kind of start there. They know their kid better than we do. They're with them, it's their kid. And I think just sharing that, I always would share that with parents. You know your kid better than I do. And I want to build that relationship. And, I know you really care. And of course, there's things. And if, you might disagree on certain things and that's okay. But I do think, you try to validate their feelings because that's how they feel in that moment. And it is their kid. And, it's hard. And sometimes those are tough conversations. They don't always go as exactly the way you want them to. But there's a way to sort of, still partner with families, through those conversations. And if things aren't going well, I think, a big part of that is maybe you're not listening. And you said that. And as I grew as a coach and as administrator, really listening. I think about, we have meetings in school, right? We have IEP meetings for kids. First thing we do in every meeting is what are the parent concerns and comments. First thing we do, we start with the parents. So I think that's like, for me, same thing when you're talking about coaching, like really hearing them out, giving them a chance to sort of clear the air and talk. And I find things go a lot better. So I think that's really important. And, just as you had shared.
Coach, great point about we don't know their kids as well as they do. But I think without realizing it, sometimes I act like that. Like I act like just because I'm in the gym with them, that I do know them like that. And so at my fall parent meeting every year, I acknowledge that with them. And we actually do Zoom meetings now with all the programs because private school, not everybody lives around here. And I've noticed that since I started doing that with COVID, I get almost 100% of participation, where if I try to bring everybody up to the school and I get to record it. So if they miss, I can send it to them. A lot of good things, reasons for a Zoom parent meeting. But I tell them that I acknowledge the fact that I don't know their kids as well as they do, but I do watch them train every day. So as far as them as a basketball player, I am learning more and more each day, and I feel like I can speak to that. But I think that's a good thing for coaches to let parents know that we celebrate and we respect the role that they play in their son or daughter's lives, and that we're not that.
And, the other thing I think, for me with the families that has always been like, I think it's been a support system is our core values, because, you're trying to accomplish a lot of the same goals they are as parents, right? Like for us, it was always appreciation, accountability, competitiveness, relentless, and teamwork. And we actually had enthusiasm at one point, and our team voted on relentless, which I loved. We shifted one of our core values. But you want kids to be appreciative. You want to hold them accountable. So I bring a lot of my parent conversations back to that. And like, we want the same thing, right? And how do we get there together? And, it might not always be perfect. There's things that they might not agree with, but we want to build the next generation. And again, it's not my child. I'm blessed that people share their kids with me, whether it's in school or now as a basketball trainer, as a coach for many years. But I think about those core values and how they really fit to all walks of life. And I think that's always been a nice connection with families. And they see you're teaching the kids more than just basketball or football or whatever it might be. And that's always helped in those conversations. And it's always been a consistent. I could always go back and say, we talk about competitiveness and you come into playing time, which was not, frankly, something I did really talk a lot about. It's, but I would always talk about practice and say, every day we're doing this in practice, and here's our competition. Some people call it like a cauldron of competition, but here's our chart. And like, I wouldn't show them the kids' names per se, but here's where your kid is, and here's their wins, and here's what they've done. And so you have that data that goes along with it. But if you live those core values every day, and you share those with families to kind of bridge that gap of communication and then sort of your program and what you believe in, I really think that goes hand in hand. And that actually would be advice I give to coaches when they ask. I'm like, what are your core values? What do you believe in? How are you living that with your team? And why are you living that? Like, why is accountability important to you? I can tell you why it's important to me, but it has to be important to you and your team. So why is it? And that's something I've shared with coaches as well.
Coach, a lot of golden nuggets right there. A great point about in those meetings about playing time, which we all know that 99% of the parent meetings we'll have, and the 1% they say it's not about that, and then it just weaves its way around. It's just, all of a sudden we're here, and that's okay. When I was at McKinney High School, public school down here, I was very much I'll talk to you about anything, and this is from my head coach because I was a varsity assistant, but we will talk to you about anything except playing time. Well, we didn't have a lot of parent meetings then. Came to faith, they pay to be here. They pay for the academics, they pay for the Christian atmosphere. They don't pay to play basketball here, but it's a part of it. So I have an open door policy on that. Over the years, I don't think it's been bad to talk with that about parents and maybe try to figure out where their head's at, but I think you're right on the money. If it does come up, you need to have something more than just what you see. If you're only talking about what you see, when I watch them in practice, this is what I see. Unless they come to practice, unless they have the same set of lenses you have, then it doesn't matter to them. So you got to have something either with stats, with things that you chart in practice, shooting games, shooting percentage, invite them to practice, but have that open discussion. But I think you're right on the money there.
Yeah, no, and the more data you have, the better. And it's not an aha moment. And I think you have to be really conscientious about that. You bring the parents in and you share that with them and like, hey, let's take a look at this together. And then it's also like, here's what they can do to continue to get better. Maybe it's the end of the season. They have a whole year. Maybe it's the middle of the season. Very similar to what you shared, for pretty much for the most part, don't get into the playing time conversation because it can get tricky. But when I would get into it, I felt like there was that value of that data and those statistics. And those are the times, I would say, hey, let's sit down. Let's talk about it. This is really bothering you. It's your kid. You care about them. You're losing sleep over this. But here's what I see. Here's how I see it. And here's the stats to sort of back it up. And, what else can we do? And I've had parents say offer up a suggestion in terms of their kid, like my kid struggles in these moments with this. So there's been some really productive things, hypothetical, but like little Sammy, has a tough time in practice, like with this part of it. And they've shared this with me, and this is why they do. And their whole life, they've always struggled with this. So they've always struggled with free throws because they have this. So they've shared things, and I like those conversations. So like now we're like, okay, I can help him with that. And, he has never shared that with me. And also think sort of same topic, a little bit of a sidestep here, but I would love to have the players in those meetings as much as possible because, you really want to make them part of that. And for me, I would like to talk to the player as much as the parent in those meetings. So that's like another little tidbit that I would share with coaches, but, players don't always share everything. So sometimes the parent can share for them, hey, they're really struggling. Your press is hard and you guys run and jump. They're not getting it. They're not sharing that with you. And like that meeting can bring, and that's a productive meeting to me because I'm saying, okay, I can see that. And I, as a coach, I'm trying to help them, but there's a roadblock and you're telling me what that roadblock is now, your kid. So there's things that can come out of it. It's not always that nice. Those are more rare than not, to be honest. But there are times where you can sort of have that productive, back and forth. And I think bringing the kid in is also a really important part of that conversation.
Great idea to bring the kid in. I have that in our parent meeting. It rarely happens, though. I would say that the big red flag for me is when the email or the text or the call is, hey, I'd like to meet. And then they slip in, I don't want my son to know. I think that's where we do need to maybe be careful. And it's never a bad idea to have another adult in the room when we're having the parent meeting. But I'd be very careful, again, separate from what I've read in this book, to email these have an email conversation or a text. I would talk. I get them in person. I get them on the phone. You kind of go back to the growth mindset idea that you had. If we're trying to continuously learn, not only become better coaches, but also learn more about our players, then we want to have these hard conversations. One of my favorite talks I've been able to have is by a guy named Josh Stewart. He was the coach at Lodge Grass in Montana on an Indian reservation. Incredible. But he said, instead of faking it till you make it, we need to face it till we make it. Instead to take the fake part out, but like facing it till we make it means we lean into those hard conversations and we're not going to be afraid to have them. So I think that's another reason to have these talks, even about playing time. But another thing that I feel like we need to do is to not be ashamed in our parent meetings or with our players or parents to talk about the fact of, even though we have an overarching theme and goal to our season, it's more than about basketball. 2 nights a week, we're going to do everything we can to win. And that playing time is not guaranteed, but I do have a guarantee for your parents. The guarantee is that I will develop your son or daughter every single day. How do we do that? 43 minutes of skill work. You're welcome to come watch. But I think if you just say playing time isn't guaranteed, and then that's just it. Okay, I want to give them something, though, that I am guaranteeing, and that's development.
Yeah, no, that development's so important. And you mentioned inviting them into practice, and it's like, I think there's something that can be said about that. I also think, with that skill work and that development, I mentioned the core values of our program. You're also offering up, we're going to work together. And I think that helped in a lot of the conversations. I mentioned this earlier, but we both want, the same thing here, right? You want your child to be accountable. You want them to be a good teammate. You want them to have that resiliency. These are things we're going to instill in them. We're going to help them to be better leaders. We had captains in training and sort of a captain and leadership program we built into our program. So there was things that went beyond X's and O's. And then to your point, which I love, it's like, here's the skill work. Here's the development of things we're doing to help them to be better players. And I've had kids that, as sophomores, maybe played half JV, half varsity, didn't play as much. I've had those conversations. And then as juniors and they're playing more, and as seniors, they're captains and they're going on to play in college. So you have situations like that where the kid does have that. I mean, I think they always have that growth, but there are times where maybe a parent might approach you and have those conversations and you share that feedback. And those are the ones it's great when you're in a program for X amount of years, because you see those kids through. Yeah. And then you see those parents 2, 3, 4 years later, you go to the kid's college game and they're giving you a hug and they're talking to you. And it's like, this is what it's all about. We both had a goal. We had a good conversation. It was productive. We worked together. And now we've seen the outcome that can happen. And you can't do it alone in those situations. If that kid's going home and mom and dad, aunt, uncle, grandma, whoever they're living with is saying that coach is no good, don't listen to it, that kid's going to come to practice every day and it's going to be really, really hard for you. But if you can partner with them and find a common ground and they're supportive, but you have to build that trust, and that's hard to come by sometimes. And, it takes a lot of work. And I think the longer you're in a program, the more trust you get. If you're new to a program, it does take some time to build that, and then have to have those conversations and be really open and honest.
And I think we have to be okay with the conversation ending in a way where it's not resolved, where they don't come around to see our point of view. Because I think without realizing it, we go into a lot of these talks like, okay, here's how I'm going to sway them. Here's how I'm going to get them to see my side, and then we're going to hug on the way out, and we're going to be good. No, I think we listen to them. If they do want some of our reasoning or they want to hear from us, then we give what we can, especially when we have data to back things up. Like you said, we invite them to be around more. Another good disarming thing, too, is just start with compliments. How much you love their kid, and not lie, how much you love their kid, the good things that you've seen them, and maybe celebrate them for something that you've seen recently. Man, in practice, another guy was having a hard time, and he came right alongside of him. I just love the way he does that. And I think something, starting with maybe that compliment, even starting the whole talk off with a compliment sandwich of I'm going to compliment them. The sandwich is everything they want to say, and I'll say, and then I'm going to compliment at the end. But being okay, I don't know if that comes with time, but being okay with the idea that this may not end great, but it's still necessary, and that's okay.
I think with the compliments too, I love that point, because I feel like so many times, and it's not their fault, but I do think parents come in and it's like it's personal. They don't my kid, right?
Yes.
And the data helps with that. But I think like when you're telling them, I do like your kid, and here's why I like them, and here's the great things they're doing, here's all the positive stuff that's going on, but also here's what they need to work on. And to your point, there are times they walk away from those conversations and they're not satisfied. And that's sort of, like when I was saying, you have that kid as a sophomore and it might not be perfect, but hopefully over the years you get to see that growth, and the parent will at least instill enough trust in you that the kid sticks it out and they're working with you on it. And, sometimes you have to have a second and third conversation. Working in a school and you're working with kids, you're dealing with academics and discipline and things, but there's times where you have meetings and okay, let's hit the pause button, let's come back, let's revisit this, and here's what we're going to focus on until then. And at times you have to do that. That's hard, especially I had one of those, thinking back to like my first year coaching and as a head coach, and that was really hard.
That's a big deep breath right there.
It was, and I feel like I wore it like, I didn't resolve it. And like, you kind of like have to have that on you for a while. And I feel like you came back to it and things went better, and it took some time. But I feel like when you're a newer coach, a first time head coach, especially, those conversations are hard. And when you don't solve it in the moment, it's that much harder. And, it takes time sometimes to sort of work through those things, and they see the growth of their player. Their kid comes home, their kid's happy, likes the team, is having a good experience. Maybe they're not playing as much because we know it always goes back to playing time, but there's other value, and that sort of helps in those situations. And then you come back to it and, I'd like them to play more, but there's some other things that help. I don't know that you can win every person. Not everyone's going to feel like, if I'm being honest, that they're going to there's people that are going to disagree with you, whether it's a fan, it's a coach, it's someone watching the game who's scouting you, whatever it is. You're not going to always win every situation and sort of like, but the flip side of that is I think it's so important that they respect what you're doing. They trust what you're doing, and they can disagree with you, but they have to sort of you have to find that common ground. And sometimes that's a difficult thing.
And those conversations that do challenge you, I think there's good in that. It challenges your resolve. How much do you really believe in what you're doing and how you're playing? I had a grandparent of one of our players a few years ago. We were meeting, and we met up quite a bit, but this was after the year, and he was giving me his thoughts, and he said, I just don't think we'll ever win a state championship shooting so many threes. And because we do try to shoot a high volume. And I remember in the moment thinking like, I don't know if that's true, that if that's why we may not win a state championship, but I'm okay with that. I felt that in the moment, like, this is who we are. This is how we play. It's how we train. It's a part of our identity, is that we're going to run and gun and have some fun. And if that means that we don't win a state championship for some reason because of that directly, then I think I'm okay with that. It's the same idea that you need to have a playing style that you're okay losing in. I mean, those are things that I think help you, those tough conversations.
So I actually, great sort of segue, like sort of into a new topic, but the same, kind of going to stay on the same lines for a second here. I had a parent, actually, I had first 2 years, went deep into the state tournament, great first 2 years. Third year, we had a young team. We started 4 freshmen. I mean, anyone who's coached knows, like, wow, we just, public school, small public school, we were rebuilding, and we had a couple of seniors. And I had a parent who, in his way, said, we used the run and jump press. And we also played a little bit of a matchup zone as I progressed, but that's a story for another day. But he said, like, insanity, sent like an email and said 3 nice things. And then, but you're never going to be great with that. Similar, right? I guess all coaches have choice. And he said, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and thinking you're going to get a different result. And why don't you try something else, right? And we did. But that's, his limitations to his knowledge of basketball was like whip pressing. And so anyways, we ended up building with those kids and had a great run, state semifinals when they were juniors and on. So we had a great run with them, and we used the press. We included the matchup zone too. But it's just interesting that sometimes they look at sort of, and we shot a lot of threes as well. We were a dribble drive team. We fired a lot of threes, and we liked that. That was our style. We played fast, get up the floor, attack, and then attack on defense too. And, thinking back to that parent communication piece is like, sometimes you're going to get that. And like, for me, I believed in what we were doing, and, they don't always have to agree with our style of play. Said some nice things, don't agree with our style. We went on, we were successful with it. And, that's each to their own. But I think that also speaks to sort of something I always would hang my hat on, was our full court pressure, run and jump defense. It was so important to us because it separated us from schools that might have been a little more athletic, a little bit bigger. Our center, and this is girls basketball at the time, was about 5'10". And we played against teams that had, one team had a center, went Division I. We beat in the state tournament, and she was about 6'3". But we pressed them the whole game. We didn't double off. We didn't double off of her. We hugged her the whole game and stayed with her. We didn't double her at all. We didn't need to. Maybe a little bit in the low post, but like when she had the ball in the press, we let her get it, and then we just denied everybody else. She'd pass it, and then we go run and jump again. We never left her. But that we won that game because of our press. We wouldn't have been, if they could have brought the ball up the floor comfortably and just threw it into her, we would have fouled out all our players. We couldn't have covered her. But we covered her because of the press, and we wore her down because of that. So that system was so important to our team. And so to hear that, you get that communication, and of course you think about it, right? People are watching the game and you start to reflect and think about your style and your system, and you talk to your coaches, but this is what we do, and we believed in it, and it was what made us great. And, I was never going to change it, but you certainly reflect when you hear that feedback.
Yeah.
So.
And I don't think that's bad. And again, they are entitled to their opinions, and I think the less confrontational we can be about that. But I was also thinking of an idea too that I think is important, is sometimes being proactive with these meetings, being the ones that actually, I'm not saying look for conflict, I'm not saying that, don't pick fights, but we all know after games, when we either can read a player's body language, or when we scan the crowd after the game looking for our loved ones, we see the nods of approval or a wave, or we see the opposite. Like parents, I feel like they think they're hiding it, how they really feel, but it's pretty easy to tell. And when I see that, I try to make a note of it, either through the player or the parent, and make a decision of, maybe I want to be proactive, and I'm the one who sends an email, say, hey, would you like to get together and meet? I'd like to talk about Johnny. Or I pull Johnny in the next day before he has an opportunity to do anything and say, hey, just want to see where you're at. I think eating the frog that way, doing the hard thing. And here's a really short story is had a player, I had his older brother and then his younger brother was playing and just not getting as much time. Great kid, loved their family, worked really hard, but just behind some guys and young. And I knew it was buggy. I knew it was hard on him, and I knew his parents pretty well. And I saw his mom sitting in the stands and during the JV game, and I just went up and sat next to her real quick. I said, "Hey, just want to let you know, first of all, that and I really love your son, and I appreciate him so much. And I know that him not getting the time right now is tough. I just want to let you know that I acknowledge that." And she just got a little emotional. And she said, "It is so hard to be mad at you because, one, I respect what we're trying to do, which is we're trying to win. And I never hold back on that, but it's also fair." But I think us like showing, like you kind of have said, like showing the human side, being vulnerable. Let's not act like this is easy and if you have kids, like mine's 18 and I've just gone through a couple summers of select ball where he's not been the best player and he hasn't played very much. And my wife goes, "Should you go talk to him?" I go, "No, I'm not doing that, but you want to and you judge, but I'm not in practice. I don't know everything going on." So I don't know. I'm just trying to I love the way the direction our talk has gone to something we didn't even have planned, but it is parent meetings and all these things that are so important to culture. This is a part of it. It's not just those words on the wall. It's how we do everything.
Yeah, and a big one that comes up a lot, and I talk to coaches about this a lot, that I sort of support on the side, is the younger player, freshman maybe in your program, who's really talented, still behind some of those older players, and you bring them up on varsity. I've seen two schools of thought on this, and you might have too. My school of thought, which I think a lot of coaches share, but also there's another side to this. I typically put that player at the JV level. Well, if they're good enough, they're going to start on varsity, great, they're going to play. Yeah. But if you have a veteran team and they're going to be 9, 10, 11, 12, right? And you might not go that deep. You might play 8 deep. That kid can get some seasoning on JV and play and get those minutes. But the flip side is, and what I feel coaches that struggle more, sometimes you can struggle. Their parent might think they're good enough to play on the varsity, and you have that conversation with the data and the practice and whatever. But as the coaches, a lot of times I see coaches that will put them on varsity and they'll sit on the varsity and they don't play at that lower level. And it's a philosophical thing. I coached with someone, I was an assistant who I love dearly, but they would put kids on varsity and they wouldn't play them on JV. And they would keep them, they would practice with varsity, and then they might get in a little bit, but they sat a lot. And I used to say to them as an assistant, and, they said, "Hey, when you're a head coach, you can do it your way, but that's okay." But they would say, I would say, like, they could play, give them a quarter, give them a half. We could do quarters in my state. So let them play a little bit, and just because they're not getting that game experience. And, but I might need them and they might get in here. And some games they did, some they didn't. But that was a lot of parent conversations, I feel like, with younger players, was around sort of that player who could play varsity, and should they be on there, and the parent thinks they should, or the vice versa. You put them on there and they're not playing as much, and you sort of, what's the school of thought? Are they better to get time? I feel like it was my common sense to me that they should play on the JV and get those minutes. But the argument on the other end was, we want them on varsity, they're part of the team. We want them on the bench. We want them there every game. We want them to be part of it. I was like, they still can, so it was a back, but I feel like that was a thing that came up a lot with younger players was, what do you do with that player that's really talented, but maybe not quite ready for varsity? And sometimes parents think they are, and sometimes you might not think they are. And those conversations come up as well.
Man, I love that you brought that up. It's incredible. About 4 hours ago at our lunch period, I was sitting with my assistant coach, looking back, thinking back over, he played for me and his younger brother played for me. And so awesome. Now that having him back around, we were talking about some of those older teams. The culture in the gym right now, it really does feel like it's in a good place. And not that it won't be tested. We know it will. There are culture breakers that come up every day, but It's in a good place. So we were talking about that and how we got here. And then I started apologizing for, I think, some of my failures early on here at Faith. One of the big ones we talked about, though, was bringing players up, having them play JV. And early on, I think it was a more insecurity from me, worried about keeping the kid, worried about keeping the parents happy, letting him know how good I thought he was, whatever the motivation was. There's one player in particular, I brought him up, and it's not like he never played, but he could have had a freshman year where he ran the show, really learned our flow style of offense, made mistakes, scored a lot of points, confidence soared, but he was practicing with us. He did get in some games, but his dad at the end of that freshman year, or actually the end of his sophomore year, because his sophomore year we had a young team, but he was on, he played a lot, but he was like, we knew the freshman year was going to kind of be a throwaway. And he said that, I remember going like,
Yeah.
why do you say that? He's like, well, I mean, he was on varsity, but he didn't really play. And like, that's always stuck in my head. But it took me years to get to the point where, okay, the guys on varsity minus the seniors, so what do you call that? Underclassmen, they have to be good enough to play major minutes. I don't care what grade they're in. They could be juniors. And if they're not, they're going to be on JV. They're going to play a lot. They're going to fail. I will have the group practicing with me that I want. And that could be freshmen, sophomores. I'll pull from those teams. Or some days I'll say, hey, JV, I'll tell them at the beginning of the year, JV is your team. I'm going to have you practice with me quite a bit because I want to work with you. And then if we're traveling and there's no conflict or at a home game, you can sit with us. Yeah. But I designate, because I had another player, and I'm sorry for rambling. I know this is your time. I apologize, but this is good. I had another player. I had him do both. He was on both teams. So like he thought he was JV, he thought he was varsity. And then at the end of the year, he's like, Coach, I really didn't feel like I had a team. I don't want that either. So in my opinion, this is what we do, coaches. We designate who is in I like the softball lineup idea. Who's in that top 9? The 9 that in a 32-minute game, we can realistically get time. After that, and now I'm not talking about the seniors that you love them and they're still with you, they're on the team, that's fine. After that, though, they are JV players. And I say, this is your team. This is who you align with. This is, in most practices, you'll be there. But if I can pull you up and help. But the distinction between the two, we've done it for the last couple of years here. And they may not, the juniors especially, may not like it, but they're going to love playing a ton. And at the end of it, they're going to, I think, be more confident players.
I love that. You said it best. I think having that distinction is so important because kids want to really know, like, where do I fall and where do I stand? And I think, where I started and where you jumped in, like that conversation is like, it's hard with those players sometimes because especially early in the year, you're still trying to evaluate them, especially a freshman and see where they're at. And
you're right. But you can always, it's like discipline. You can always get easier, but it's hard to get harder. So I'd rather move a guy up. Like, you know what, man, you've been busting it where he got injuries, whatever, or he just winds up being better. You're right on the money, Coach.
I always will, to your point, practice, like at least, you don't have the games, you have some scrimmages, practice with the varsity and, you have a shot. And I think this communication, we're going to go back to it where we started, but you have that conversation with this kid and say, look, you're a freshman, you have a great skill set. We want to see what you can do. We're going to practice you with varsity. There's a chance you could play some JV minutes this year and play some JV games. There's a chance you could be all varsity. We want to see what you have to offer. And you can have that conversation and have that dialogue. And I think if you're communicating it in a way that they can understand and like, okay, I have a chance to really work hard at this. And like I told you, I started 4 freshmen one year. They were good enough. They were better than the other kids I had. And I had to start them. And that's what it was. It was what it was. And sometimes you deal with that. I know you mentioned public school versus like private. And I think you see probably more of that public school you're sort of rebuilding. And I know that sounds like you started at public school as well. And we were rebuilding. We lost like 7, 8 seniors. And we just, that was where our numbers fell. We had some kids we had developed, but this younger group was really talented. And we put them out there and we played them and we took some lumps that year, but we were better for it in the long run.
Coach, there's a little nugget that you said, and this is back when you kind of mentioned some of your pillars of your program that I wrote down because I didn't want to let it slip, which was that you had enthusiasm, but then they voted and changed it to relentless. So the fact that you had your team vote on parts of your culture and you allowed them to shift one of the core values, I think you're right on the money there with, we want them to be co-creators. We want them to feel like they are a part of this. Well, we can't just cram something down their throat that we like or we saw that looks good on a t-shirt, and there's nothing wrong with those things. But when they are able to have that amount of buy-in or accountability, whatever you want to say, I think you'll get the buy-in. Yeah.
Yeah, so we talked as a team, and we visited every year. And that year, the team, it was relentless and resilience they came up with, which is like kind of 6 of one, half a dozen the other, right? But they had wanted to make a change, and they're like, if we do all of these things, if we're relentless and we're competitive and we're great teammates, we're accountable, we're appreciative, we feel like we're bringing enthusiasm. Like it's sort of over, it's like, it's always going to be there. We're going to bring that. And we feel like these things bring it. But the one thing that's not on there is that resilience, that relentless, a lot of it stemmed from our pressure. They believed in it. We had pressure on the back of our shirts, on our programs. Other coaches would comment in the paper. I used to love it. They would write, "Oh, the pressure got to us," and I would copy it and show the kids. And it's like, yes, well, we gotta, we're playing in the tournament. We got to get ready for their press. And I'm like, we're in their head, that right. Psychological aspect. So the kids were like, if we're playing with this, we really need that. Like we're relentless. We feel like this is us. And so we brought it together. We voted on it. Some kids like the enthusiasm still, and they came up and I think there was one other one that they might have come up with. I can't remember right now, but whatever it was. And we voted on them. And I feel like that ownership piece, to your point, is so important because they were invested in the values of the program. They're invested in our system. And they're like, this is what we are. And like every day we're going to bring this. And that year, that was actually one of my final 2 years with this program before I moved on. And I would tell you the last 2 years, it meant a lot to us. We also, to kind of build off that, we had a word as a team. They had one word. And so they each picked one word that identified them, whether it was grit or determination or
individually or as a team?
Individually. And then we had a team word that we used collectively as a team as well that they wrote on the ball. So typically it came down to our core values, but they all had their own individual words. And I thought that was I read, I don't know if you read John Gordon, but one word, and I do one word every year. It means a lot to me. My wife does it. We always come up with one word. So I had the players do it, and there was a lot of value in that as well with our team. So we had like our core values that guided us, but they had their individual words that they were. And I said, this isn't just a basketball thing. This is a thing you're going to carry with you beyond basketball. And that was a nice little thing that we did as a group and shared and talked about why that word was special to us, why we were picking it. That made a big difference. So.
I love that. And I'm going to borrow the asking what one word describes them, or I'm going to borrow that because I think you could do a lot of fun things with that. And sometimes it kind of goes in line with knowing what their aspirations are, knowing how they view themselves. If you know what your players' dreams or goals are, you can hold them accountable to that. If you know the word that they say they are or they're about, you can hold them accountable to that. One thing I was trying to think of, like, for coaches that do like to have their core values, that because I do think you said early on with communication or with growth mindset, if we don't have it, if we're not showing that, then players aren't going to get it either. Same thing with culture. If we don't live it, if we don't believe in it. But so a good idea, I think, is combine. And you may have 3 or 4 that, because players will leave and graduate. Hopefully we stay and remain. So there's a part of the culture that doesn't change. It's us. And so if we know who we are and we have our pillars that are important to us and the way we want our program to show up every day, well, keep those and then let them choose one, right? So like 5-fingered approach from Coach K, 4 of them have been here for a long time. It's who we've been for a while. It works on the court and off the court. But that last one, the seniors get to choose that every year. They get to think about their word. But then that word shapes our program in a lot of ways. But I think it's a marriage, that like a partnership with them, that guys, this is who we are, but I also want to know who you think we are. Instead of, so as a coach, you're not compromising. And well, I love that word, humility. That's what I think. Keep it, but let them choose something as well.
I love that idea. And I think it's, part of that ownership we talked about, with them even picking that new word, but every year having that flexibility, and they'll come up with great stuff. Just the words they came up with for themselves were so are so meaningful that we would go back and they would talk about like, why is this important to you? And like, it would be basketball, but it would be beyond that. And with our values, just to kind of get back to the core value piece, every day we highlight one of them at practice. So we had Appreciation Friday. So every Friday we would do something to show appreciation. Let me tell you. So we did this thing where they each had another player. One player had another player. It was a secret. They didn't know who it was at the time, but they would come up with some way to show appreciation. So one of our players, I had no idea. I thought they'd write like a nice letter. She got up in her science class. This is a true story. She got up in her science class, told her teacher, "Can I do this?" Teacher loved it. "I love that you're doing this." But she read her letter about her teammate in front of her science class. "And this is why I appreciate such and such." And so they come that night. We had a game. It was a Friday. We did a teacher appreciation game as well. And they came in, they were all laughing and like, "Oh, you won't believe what such and such did." And I said, "Well, what happened? What did she do?" And they told me. And the other girl was like watery-eyed. And she's like, "I can't believe she did it. It was so nice, coach. This was the best." And so little things like that, I never envisioned. To me, they were going to tell each other in person, they were going to text each other, put something in writing. The fact that she did that, like, took it to a whole different, level for me. And we would try to, have one of those things every day. We did like accountability. A lot of that was around communication, so we did that. Wednesday was always our competition day that we would like in practice. We always had competition, but we really highlighted it on that specific day. And we would have the most competitive for that day. We'd have the most accountable. We did accountability. We did teamwork, best teammate. So those are little things that we did to kind of live our core values. And then we as coaches also had to, demonstrate that, which was so important because we can put those words on paper, but if they're not living them, we're not living them. And you mentioned this, and it kind of got me thinking along these lines of what I'd done as a program and some examples. But, if we hadn't done these things in practice and on our practice plan at the top, I had like, most competitive and then who it was. And we tracked that all year and we would share that out at the banquet. So those are things that, your core values are core values on paper, and that's great. Pressure was on the back of our shirts, and that was great. But how do we demonstrate that in the game with our press? How do we live our core values? And, even more than I would have thought, the players lived it, and it's really a credit to them. Like I never imagined some of the things that would come from this when I first started coaching, and I'm so appreciative, and I'm sure all coaches feel this way, but I'm so thankful for the players I coached because they exceeded my expectations, and I don't know that I exceeded theirs, but I hope so. But they're amazing, and I keep in contact with them, and these things still come up to this day. So yeah, pretty cool.
Yeah. That's why I love getting to do this. Talking X's and O's is great. And I already mentioned how I've learned a little bit from you, and you've talked about your pressure, and we've played that way before. So that style of play definitely interests me. But I think the thing that I enjoy learning or listening to even more is how other coaches do this, like how they run a program. Because again, there's just so many, there's so many styles of play. There's so many things that great new offenses are. I mean, you watch UConn the last couple of years, everybody wants to do that. You hear all the Princeton guys. Like there's just so many things that are great, and you get to choose those. But man, the way that you choose the direction of the program, the culture that is living and breathing within it. I mean, to me, I think that's the 90%. The 10% is the practice plan and all the stuff that we end up spending 90% of our time on. And so I really appreciate you sharing that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And just, when we started, we talked about like, sort of what makes a great coach. And there's so many things, just to kind of build off your point, which is a great one. There's so many things that make a great coach. But these are the things I think that really separate them, and culture is such an important part, as you just mentioned. And hopefully coaches got some things. I honestly, I love doing these because you've shared so many great things that I've heard just talking to you right now that I'm thinking about as well. So it's great, like the back and forth I appreciate with coaches so much, because you learn and then they bring up points, and it's like you get this nice back and forth, and it's you learn so much from these conversations. So thank you.
Man, before I let you go, because this has been great, there's a speed round. These are going to be quick questions. First thing that pops in your head, blurt it out. You ready?
Sure, you want to hear the first thing that pops in my head? I don't know if you know. Just kidding. I'm just.
I've got to mute. I've got to no. All right. Favorite ice cream flavor?
Milky Way.
That's good. Greatest shooter of all time?
Larry Bird.
Top 3 dinner guests across any time period?
That is amazing. So John Gordon, I would love to sit down with and talk, because I've learned so much from him about positivity. History teacher by trade, assistant principal now. So would probably have to think back historically, and maybe someone like Abraham Lincoln, and you think about what he had to manage and deal with at that time, and the stress, and how do you just so much about that decision making, all that stuff. So I probably would say Abraham Lincoln as a second person, and then my third person would be Shaka Smart. And a lot of what I've talked about today and I've learned as a coach has really come from him. I learned a lot from his core values and his press, and just seeing what he's done. And I would love to just get in a room and really how he's evolved from that pressure system to what he's doing at Marquette now, and offensively what he's doing. And I would love to sit down in a room with him and just pick his brain. And he wouldn't be able to get rid of me, though. So it'd be a lot of
fun. Love that. That's a good dinner. Best basketball movie of all time?
Hoosiers. Yeah, definitely watch it. My brother's a little bit older than I am, and from that generation. And second would be He Got Game, which was more my generation. And
Jesus Shuttlesworth.
That was awesome. And those would be my
texting or talking.
I'm a face-to-face person, but now everyone texts like crazy. But I would rather just a Zoom or any type of face-to-face conversation.
Yeah. Okay, I'm in Texas where there's no shot clock. For high school, shot clock or no shot clock?
Got to have that shot clock. 30 seconds in Massachusetts. It to me is the way.
30 seconds.
Yeah.
Wow.
30-second shot clock. So that's all I know with high school basketball, and I feel like there is a difference in the game, and I do cringe but it's strategy and it's within reason. But when I see teams hold the ball up for 4 minutes, I'm like, oh no.
If it's allowed and it helps your team win, I don't fault the coach at all. But
I agree.
I bet the 2-1-2 is pretty fun with a 30-second shot clock.
It is great. The press is great with the shot clock as well. The 2-1-2 can really milk the clock, or even that 3/4 1-2-2. A lot of teams run now. It puts a lot of pressure. They get it over half court, and there's 22 seconds left. They're trying to get into their set, and you make it hard for them. And I do agree. If coaching at levels where you can hold the ball out, you do it, right? If you're able to do it, it's within the rules, and you're up by 3 points, 2 minutes to go, make them foul you.
Yeah, that's part of the conversation that I don't think is ever really brought up. There's another team playing. It's like, okay, you don't like that they're in the 2-3 zone, move the ball and shoot well, or shoot with curves, make them pay. If they're going to hold the ball, come out. There's two sides to that whole argument.
I agree wholeheartedly.
Favorite holiday?
Christmas. Loved it as a kid growing up. My parents made it special, and with our 3 kids, it's still really special, and we probably go way overboard with the presents and all that. My family still gives each other all kinds of presents and whatever, but it's awesome. You get to enjoy it. You only live once, so make the most of it.
That's right. Okay, if a player gets 2 fouls in the first half, do they sit the rest of the half?
So me, typically, yes, I would sit them. But I've had some more flexibility later on in my career, and I've read a lot. Brad Stevens is very much like you put them out there and you let them play. And I've seen Joe Mazzulla do that a little bit with the Celtics. They're professionals.
Nate Oates.
But you got to know your kid. So sorry, not a short answer. I would take the kid out with 2 fouls in the first half because I think you could survive it. And I would usually, if they had 4 fouls and they're about to foul out, I'd keep them out to about 4 minutes left in the game, unless the other team swung momentum and you got to put them in, because what good is it if they're going to, they can take that foul home with them, but you lose the game. So you can't let it get too far away.
Yeah. I had a coach the other day say she allows them to have fouls until it's one more than the quarter they're in. So if they get two in the first, they're out. If they get their third in the second, fourth, and I think that's a really good way. But Nate Oates had a great talk about it this last year of, like, I'm not going to be the guy that takes my best player out when he has two fouls. He's like, if he fouls, he fouls. If he fouls in the first half and the second half, doesn't matter. They're fouls. I try to think I'm a little bit more like that. Coach K even said, I think there's no rule that says you have to take people out, but we almost act like there is. Like, oh, that's two. Come on. Like, well, not all fouls are the same. What's the timing of them? What's the game like? Like, there's a lot going on.
And knowing your kids too, right? Because there's players you have that get a little emotional and they pick up that second, and then the first and the second's quick, or the second and the third. There are players that manage that differently, and They might have picked up their second foul, and they might not have had two fouls the last three games. So like you can trust they might not get three fouls the rest of the way. So some of that, I think, especially with high school, is your players and you're able to manage it. But I was guilty of the quick hook.
Yeah. Guilty of the quick hook. I would encourage too, like in the pre-district, pre-conference, whatever you call it, let him fail. So I had a player foul out in the third quarter last year. Guarantee he never did it again. He knows what it feels like. He knows when he's pushing too far. And our team knew what it's like to not have him in the fourth. We lost. But it was a pre-district, pre-conference game. Not that we want to lose, but that was a great experiment to see how he handles it, how we handle it. Up 3 on defense with 5 seconds left. Do you foul or no foul?
Yeah, I would try to foul, but you got to practice it. So many coaches say they'd foul and they never practice it. And it's like, if you're going to do that.
Hey, guys, let's try something now.
Yeah.
It's good. What book would you give someone?
Energy Bus by John Gordon, because it encompasses all walks of life, and it really has a really good emphasis on positivity, with a lot of great golden nuggets on how to make your team and really yourself in all walks of life stay positive. So
2 more. Favorite place to travel?
Las Vegas, probably. I've been there a lot. I love the weather, love the atmosphere. Been out there a lot with my wife before kids, and the shows, and a lot to do. And if not that, Fort Lauderdale or Key West down in Florida. Warm places, because up north, it's a little cold up here in the winter.
Yeah, so. I'm originally from Pennsylvania, and so I do remember what snow is like. Down here in Texas, they don't have snow. Now, we will get out 2 days before school because they think snow's coming, and then it doesn't come, and we're just sitting around with a sunny day. It's like 60 degrees. But they don't know it down here. Last one, in basketball as a player, who is the GOAT?
Got to say Michael Jordan. That's kind of who I grew up with. I have a lot of respect for LeBron. And guys, I think that should be in the conversation, like Bird and Magic. And there's a lot of players, Russell, you go back years and years. But yeah. I think if you look at all generations of players, he was an all-defensive player. He was MVP, 6-time champion.
Yeah.
Could have been more. Some people didn't like maybe his style and sort of how he did it. He did it, and I think he was, for me, like growing up and even now, the best that I saw, and I think a lot of people would probably echo that. Although LeBron, people argue that as well.
Yeah. Coach, this was so much fun. Again, going from just following you on X and learning from some of your videos, this conversation went completely different the way that I thought it was going to go. But that's the fun part about the game and getting to do this and learning from other people. So I just thank you so much for giving up your time and doing this. This was awesome.
Thank you very much for having me. And as I said earlier, every podcast, yours in particular, is an opportunity for coaches to learn. You're giving up your time to do this for coaches to help share and grow the game. So I appreciate what you do. And for me tonight, I learned a lot from having the conversation. I reflected on things I said, and I learned a lot from things that you shared. I love the stories that you shared. Great opportunity to reflect. These are always so invaluable for the people that watch it, but for the two people involved, the back and forth, I have so much fun, and it was just a nice, easy flowing back and forth. So thank you for that. Thank you for great questions and for sharing the stories that you shared today, because that was awesome.
Before I let you go, we talk a little bit more about how to follow you, and then your website, and also the YouTube video channel.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Get Better Basketball Chat is on X, Coach_Demarco on X. Every Wednesday night, 8 o'clock Eastern time. It's been going on for 298 straight weeks, and we're going to keep this train rolling. Also, CoachDemarco.com, a lot of great resources for free, opportunities to connect with me for mentorship programs. Also, get your Get Better Everyday gear, which I am selling on the website, also on an Etsy store as well. Coaches can also follow me on Snapchat, Coach Demarco_1, and TikTok, Coach_Demarco. So I put a lot of videos out on Snap and TikTok now that are like quick hit videos. And then Twitter or X is some of the lengthier videos and some of the interviews I do with coaches similar to this one. So a lot of great resources out there. Appreciate the opportunity to share that as well. Thank you.
Thank you for checking out today's episode. Please take a moment to subscribe to this podcast, share it with your fellow coaches, and find us on social media for what's coming up next on the JAMODI Podcast. It's just a matter of doing it.